Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги,
Good morning,
уважаемые
distinguished
друзья.
colleagues, dear friends.
Рады приветствовать
We are
вас
very
на одной из
glad to
площадок
welcome
нашего
you
форума.
to one of
Тема
our
нашей
forum
сегодняшней
sessions.
экспертной дискуссии
Today we are
посвящена,
going
как вы
to
знаете,
talk about
вопросам управленческой
the
зрелости. Тема
managerial
достаточно новая.
maturity.
Если о личностной зрелости
This
мы знаем
is a new
много, то вот
topic.
управленческая
We
зрелость
know a
является
lot about
сущностью,
personal maturity, but talking
так
about
скажем,
managerial
эвристичной.
Managerial maturity, this is something heuristic, and we would like to explore what exactly it is, why a manager needs it, and why we should develop it. That's why we invited to our session the experts, guest speakers that are senior executives, having experience not just in public administration, but also in big business. They have their own personal extensive background. It's Oleg Nikolaev. He is governor of Chuvash Republic. And the second senior executive mayor of Khanty-Mansiysk, Maksim, Ryashin.
Коллеги, доброе утро, добрый день.
Dear colleagues, good morning.
И с нами также третий эксперт. Так скажем, нам нужна поддержка со стороны науки. С нами сегодня в прямом эфире онлайн профессор Юрий Викторович Sinyagin.
Scientific colleagues, so we have Professor Yuri Sinyagin, academic advisor of Department of Evaluation and Development of Professional Managers at High School of Public Administration of RANEPA. Good morning, good morning. You are far away from us, many time zones away from Moscow, but we are very glad to have you with us this morning to discuss this topic. And I would like to address to you my first question.
Представиться. Меня зовут Ilya Sheburakov, я декан факультета оценки и развития управленческих кадров,
Ilya Sheburakov. I'm Dean for Evaluation and Development of Professional Managers at High School of Public Administration of RANEPA. For those of you who don't know it, we assess managers, we perform their personal diagnostics, so to speak. It's like our
наша практическая деятельность нас и натолкнула на интерес к этой теме. Юрий Викторович, вопрос такой. Когда мы с вами рассматривали различные варианты, подбирали тему, думали, что может быть интересно аудитории в рамках Гайдаровского форума, мы ее сформулировали так, от компетентности к зрелости. И это не случайно, по всей видимости, в компетентностном подходе есть какие-то ограничения. Это классический, хороший такой надежный подход в оценке и в развитии, но при этом есть что-то, чего не хватает, когда мы говорим о руководителе с точки зрения компетенции. И в этом контексте, насколько, на ваш взгляд, перспективной является тема управленческой зрелости?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to express my opinion on this topic. And I would agree with Ilya Sheburakov that the competence-based approach is a good one, a good old approach for evaluation of executives. And this approach gives us a lot of opportunities, but it also has certain limitations. And I don't think I'm going to dive too deep in details, but just a few things. Number one, competence-based approach is a very good, efficient approach in stable economic situation. But when the situation changes, when we have to work and exist in unpredictable conditions, the competency-based approach doesn't work that well. And the second point is that when we evaluate top executives, senior executives, competency-based approach, if applied alone, is not enough at all. And that's very important. And it's the question how, which is answered by the application of the competence-based approach. But we have other questions, like what should we do, why should we do something, and what for. And a very famous lady, top executive, she said a person who knows how will always find a good job, and the person who knows why and what for will be her manager. That's why these questions, why, what for, they are very often neglected when talking about competency. So, competency-based approach answers the question how. Competency-based approach also covers questions like what, but we also have to answer those other questions. Yes, we have to assess the subjective mindset of each manager, of each executive, and that's why we have to understand his motives and mindset, answering questions why and what for. And we have another problem here. As soon as we try to assess the personality of an executive on the whole, we have to look at two groups of characteristics. One of them is qualitative, and the other one is quantitative. Qualitative traits, personality traits, and quantitative traits, and vector-based personality traits showing the vector of development of this or that personality. This is what we have to assess all together, and it's not always easy to describe a personality taking into account all these aspects, but I think we can do that if we implement new notions, new approaches, and one of them, in my mind, is the managerial maturity of an executive. This is what we are discussing here today. Thank you very much for your introduction. I also heard interesting things, something new for me today, and I would like to address the question to our experts who deal with managerial maturity in their own management teams. And before the forum started, when we were preparing our discussions, we made a senior executives poll. We polled 229 executives, asking them what they knew about the managerial maturity as such. And we will see now on the screen the result. 90% of executives said that they knew this notion of managerial maturity, but if you look into literature, you don't see that much this notion. So our preliminary conclusion based on this small opinion poll is that they intuitively understood what this notion means, but they haven't heard or read too much about it. So my question to you is, what do you think, based on your practical activities, what this managerial maturity means? Thank you very much for the question. I had an opportunity to read your article and the article of Yuri Sinyagin, and I, for the first time, saw this term, managerial maturity. Because if we talk about maturity as a high level of development of personality traits, of course, it very much depends on the basic values of the personality, because these qualities, these values, they develop, they are further developed in future. And when we try to characterize a person having this managerial maturity, I think, first of all, this is a person with very high self-motivation, a person of very high responsibility, a person serving people, a person being part and feeling as being part of the society, seeing the society as a whole, not dividing it into good and bad people. That's right, because when we talk about values, we most probably talk about why are we doing all this? Based on what Yuri Sinyagin said in his introductory word, and based on what my colleagues said, I fully agree with these approaches. And I would like to say that, of course, this managerial maturity, how does it affect people we work with? When we speak about a person managing processes and managers being managed by the senior executive, this is a team. This is one aspect we have to discuss. And the second question is, what are the consequences of this or that managerial action on the persons managed? And here, the maturity of an executive matters a lot, because the main function of an executive is decision-making. Decision-making should be adequate. Decisions should be made in time and in line with the requirements. And the managerial maturity in this context really helps an executive to collect a large amount of information to answer this or that question, and the executive also has to find an equilibrium in decision-making, because when you make a decision, you favor one category and disfavor another category. And if you really want to get promoted, to develop yourself as a manager, you also have to be ready to be restricted in certain ways. And you have to find an equilibrium in opportunities and restrictions. And managerial maturity as an indicator of managerial skills, it comprises many other indicators which are intrinsic for managers. And based on the science and theory of psychological maturity of a man, for a person to become a mature manager, this person has to have an extensive background and experience in certain areas, and this person should have different competences in different areas, not in one area. And I think all these components are top important. And since you deal professionally with this, you see it much better than I do, but I intuitively think it is like this. Well, we are not that much familiar with it, but we intuitively got interested in this approach because it seems to be very important now. And I see that our three experts, all three of them, they agree on the main aspects of this notion about why and what for in business. And our experts shared with us their opinion, and when we were getting ready for our discussion, we understood that on the one hand, theoretical model matters, and on the other hand, we need to have a toolkit to develop the model, to develop managerial maturity. This is very important, especially in public administration, like in any other management. And there are three approaches. Personal maturity-based approach, a lot is written about it. Maturity of management technologies, project management maturity, digital maturity, self-assessment maturity, and so on. And also leadership maturity in the context of leadership. This is what is discussed most of all, leadership maturity. And this means usually the way the manager communicates with people and the world. A manager should be able to understand himself first of all, understand other people, find his way and place in this world. And let's look at the opinion poll results on our screen. Here you see the total number of executives polled was 229, and each of them had their own opinion of what managerial maturity means. Some of them think this is related to knowledge of highly mature management technologies, like we started discussing it, and the percentage of those thinking that maturity means values, first of all, was not a very big one.
It is rather a projection for the managers in their personal qualities and traits to interpret this notion as we proposed it. So far, for the time being, thinking about this topic, it comes to my mind that this topic is related to the senses of the managerial activities rather than with the digital literacy and other skills, although it's also very important. It's not possible to be a good, mature personality and be a weak leader. To be a strong leader, you have to have also proper experience and skills. Probably, Professor Sinyagin, you have a comment on that? Concerning key characteristics and traits, I really liked the presentation of Oleg and Maksim. Dear colleagues, you touched upon the very essence of what is in there, what has to be implemented and meant there. This is social responsibility and social relevance, first and foremost. And also, I really have to stress the balance, the proper balance. And in this regard, this balance is a very interesting topic. I would put it in this way. The results of your poll are very indicative. The basis is the managerial and professional competency of a manager, of an executive. It is the basis, the core, which is the core condition, necessary conditions, but not the only one of the maturity. The second part of this maturity is the scale of the personality. And we partially already discussed it too. The personality scale can be considered as a volume of this personality. On one hand, this is the mindset volume from what perspective the person considers the problem. Should it be his or her personal position, organization, or team, or the whole world? And this is the height of this angle of view. And the width is the second dimension, and colleagues already mentioned that too. These are different opinions, different views, or what we can call cognitive differentiation. How many axes and dimensions the person uses to describe his or her surrounding and his or her mindset. And finally, the depth. This is the number of steps the person can look ahead strategically. The third part, the third dimension, I would call balance, the balanced view on the surrounding world. This is the clear understanding of social responsibility, fairness, and maturity and integrity, which is one of the cores of this system. And another thing, very important, is strategic idea. This is the goal the person is striving at. This is the strategic goal, which is contagious for all the surrounding of the person. Mark Twain mentioned there are two important days in the life of the person. This is the birthday of the person and the second day when we understood why he was brought to this world. This is the strategic idea, the strategic goal. The person comes to different periods of his or her life, but this is the very core around which other people can be combined and which is the key core characteristics of the person. And this all is related very closely to social qualities and the vector of the motion and the vector of implementing the ideas. Thank you very much, Professor, for your opinion. I see on the reaction of the colleagues that they agree with your stance, and we understood more or less what is maturity. And now the question is, how can we develop it? And the most important question, is it possible to develop this maturity? How can we come to this maturity in the progress of the development? We are 50 plus here, and we can also use the position of our age. We also have younger colleagues. Is it possible that the manager is young but mature? I think it's possible. It depends on the concentration of the professional experience and skills. And is maturity directly related to the age? Probably it is related to the positions and career development of the manager, because it allows to gain this breadth of the width of the views, looking at the problem from different angles. This is also very important. I'd like to propose you to start thinking on answers to this question, and meanwhile, I'd like to start a short poll in our audience. In a few moments, the viewers will have this question on their screens, and if you don't mind, please evaluate your own managerial maturity, even if you don't have any management experience, on the scale from 1 to 10, and then we can compare these results to the results of the respondents which we polled before this forum. So, colleagues, a question to you, Mr. Nikolaev. Is it possible to develop this maturity, or should it come on its own? What shall we do about it? Of course it is possible, but at the same time,
это, наверное, возможно,
I
если у человека
it is
есть,
possible if the person
можно выразить,
has
природный дар.
some natural gift, some aptitude to this maturity development. And my thinking is confirmed by the discussion in this studio and by a number of so-called historical research and practical approaches to implement these things. As Dr. Sinyagin mentioned, the maturity and different angles of view, it's obvious that these angles can be different for different stages of maturity. The line manager, can he be a mature developer, or shall it be started only from the governance level? As the department head, he can be mature, especially for his or her level. The regional head has, of course, absolutely different requirements, and there are different qualities to be able to say that he is a mature leader. Criteria are absolutely different there. And if we come back now to the wonderful Soviet history of our country, I think at that time there were two universal tools which pushed the economics. That was the staff reserve and the scientific organization of the labor. But this is not our topic for debate, but the staff reserve is the topic of our today's discussion. It means when specific positions were determined and special people were assigned and developed those positions. They developed it in both directions, the width and the height. And the person was ready by some moment to have this process, to lead it, to be able to be responsible for that process, and was important to take the risks and in certain periods to break the borders, the fixed borders, to provide this vector-based development in a different direction, which is required for a corporation or a country, depending where the person is living and working in. And, probably you will add something. I believe that the experience is as a tool to develop the maturity. The person can be placed in a certain media or situation where he can gain experience very quickly. We can create artificial models when executives get to the mature state earlier. I think it's possible if we place the executive in a certain media and provide also proper coaching institute in a certain form. It can be really efficient, and I really agree that a person at 30 years of age can be experienced enough and mature enough to be a good leader. If you stay on the same place, complacent for 40 years, your experience will be at the level of the place you stay. I think coaching can be mutually beneficial, both for the coach and for the trainee. If you are a coach, you can develop yourself as well. If you start to learn, you can start teaching someone and you can learn better. Okay, let's have a look at the results of the poll from our audience. We can do this. I hope I can see these results on the screen. In general, they are very much similar to the results we got from our poll.
Я вижу такую кривую нормального распределения
практически с точки зрения самооценки уровня зрелости. И порядка, наверное, approximately 30%,
боюсь ошибиться, считают, что они достаточно зрелые управленцы, касается нашей аудитории. И у меня просьба сейчас вывести на экран результаты того опроса, который мы проводили накануне, в котором участвовало 229
including 229 leaders. They are presenting a very similar picture to our audience. There's a movement coaching
оценка от 8 и выше говорит об высокой удовлетворенности, но об отсутствии смысла, в общем-то, двигаться и развиваться. По крайней мере, человек, который поставил себе такую оценку, он как бы успокоенно относится к тому, о чем его спрашивают.
Is quite complacent. On one hand, it is good, but on the other hand, it deprives the person of the stimulus, of the incentives to develop further on. These are our results, and once again, they reflect the vision of people in terms of their self-assessment. It is not necessarily objective assessment. Professor Sinyagin, question to you. What do you think? To what extent perspective could be the topic of evaluating and assessing the maturity when the person provides a self-assessment, reflecting his own results? It could be also beneficial, but probably it's better to do it in the context when we build up reserves, when we assess managerial teams. Is it possible to assess managerial maturity? Would it be a good hit or miss? Probably it's a preliminary question, but at the first glance, please, what is your stance on that? So first of all, what I want to tell you, today we already discussed this, and it is also confirmed by the results of many studies. The fact is that those leaders who ask to assess themselves or their teams, they are today not satisfied by having just quantitative assessment of their profiles and competencies, and they ask for a good description, qualitative description. And I believe in this regard, maturity is a very good instrument, a very good tool to provide this description. First and foremost, I mean the levels or stages of maturity. And here, probably, it's not enough to have only one measure here. Only one indicator is not enough. Of course, the state assessment should contain the assessment of the prospective development. And from the prospective point of view, the notions that we use, the readiness and the potential and relevant potential and the development potential in the good sense of this world, I don't believe that this is too bad in terms of profiles. Profiles are also good for that. There are a lot of traps there. The only thing I wanted to point out, just recently, a very interesting research has appeared showing that rating is a serious problem which is given very often as a result of the assessment, because as soon as the manager sees that there are top 3 in the rating, he takes these top 3, and it's absolutely not important for him to see the difference between these top 3. The first one is from 1 to 9, and the second one from 1 to 8. This is not a big difference, but the quality difference could be significant. And probably this is the basis to use such notions which are descriptive notions and descriptive assessments. And in this regard, I think we have good promising prospects for the maturity assessment, and we should evaluate it in steps.
Thank you very much. By the way, I was told that we can show now the results of our audience poll. Let's see them on the screen. Can we see them? Yes, here we see them. So, the poll results. This is the result of self-assessment for managerial maturity of our audience. And we see this very well correlates with the preliminary results. Here we see the results of self-assessment, how the executives perceive their own managerial maturity. I have a question to our distinguished experts. Dear colleagues, you have a wealth of experience, personal, managerial experience. What about your own maturity? Do you have an opinion? Do you have a premonition that you have already become a mature manager 10 years ago, or that you are going to become a mature manager shortly? What influenced you? And what helps you think that you are a mature manager? What made you a mature manager? Let me start. I think it was pure luck for me. Luck in terms of time and place of birth. I was born in a village in Soviet times in late 1960s. And like everyone at that time, I had to work to gain a result, to get satisfaction and grow. But my career path changed all the times. I had to solve new problems, meet new challenges in new circumstances. The country was changing in those years. Yes, so you were lucky lucky to be born, to have been born at the time when the changes started. Yes, and I all the time had to prove, first of all, to myself that you have to work a lot in order to see a result. And of course, when you see a result of what you do, it motivates you to go further. And talking about maturity and whether I think myself mature, of course, I would like to say yes, I am. But for anyone, especially executive, it's very important, like our colleague said, it's important to be dissatisfied with yourself, to be critical of your achievements. Doesn't matter what your achievements are, what your success is. If you are not critical to yourself, you will not be able to reassess yourself all the time to grow. We have to evaluate current challenges requiring that we change. And if we do not change in changing times, we will never be able to be mature. What about you? Do you have an answer to the question? Well, yes, I guess. If we talk about maturity as a guiding star, I guess I'm halfway to become mature. What helped me develop myself and my career? It was, first of all, my parents, and of course, those people who put me in a situation where I had to make difficult decisions. You mean personalities you could learn from, that you worked with? Yes, I mean people who were in close contact to me, and also people whose life and career was a good example, a role model for me. And just an example, a few years ago, I thought that motivation, the best motivation is inspiration. If I can inspire people working with me, they will be able to work miracles. It's difficult to explain in clever textbooks. This is something you have to understand when you analyze yourself, when you perform the self-evaluation. Immature manager does one thing, and a mature manager, he inspires those he manages. Interesting. Yes, you said that you were lucky to be born in late 60s. I am also lucky to be born in those times because these changes started, and these changes, they are very swift now in this changing world. That's very interesting, this time we are living in. You know, I'm not saying that the new managers will become mature in less time than we did, because they work based on all the things we did, on all the successes and on all the experience we gained. You know that now, for instance, children at 1 year of age, they sometimes know modern gadgets even better than I do. It just shows that young managers today, they are just different from us. But we, as mature people, we have personality traits, we have psychological traits to be mature, and of course to become mature, to have responsibility. to make decisions. Of course, you need time. You need time to get mature. I guess you are right. One needs time and the right people around to become mature. You are right. And we are actually winding up our discussion. And still there are a couple of questions to discuss, like social mobility means career path, those social lifts, are they an obstacle to maturity development, or they open new opportunities for development of a new generation of managers for development of their maturity? Okay, let's give the floor to Yuri Sinyagin first. Well, I think you should first ask Oleg Nikolaev this question. We don't have much time left, and I would like to hear what he thinks about it.
Вам интересно было бы ответить на этот вопрос?
Нет, несомненно, я, конечно, есть у меня свое мнение по этому поводу. Я считаю, что любой процесс
I still have doubts. I think any process has a need for a systemic approach and all-round implementation using various approaches. And the more approaches are used, the more tools are used for self-development, the better it will be. Because first, you need to come and know that you can do it. If you don't go via exams, you can undergo tests or whatever. There are different tools to confirm your maturity, to confirm your development. And the more approaches you use, the better. And like we said, this generation is completely different. They completely differently perceive information. They perceive it in a clipped way. So it means that we need to give them an opportunity to develop themselves, but in a different format as compared to what we saw in our times. And we, current executives, our role now is to identify those who are really motivated and interested to become mature, and we should support them. Do you have to add something? Yes, sure. You know, talking about career path, this is a reality which currently exists worldwide, and if we analyze the appointments of higher executives, we see an interesting phenomenon which is now called a quantum career leap. When a person jumps from one orbit to another orbit, skipping a few steps. And if we look at the efficient executives' profiles, we see that top executives, the more senior the executive is, the more elements of the profile of line managers we see. And it's very important that when a person jumps from one level to a level much higher, and if this person has the necessary personality trait set, if the person is ready for self-development, why not? Oh yes, thank you. That's a very interesting idea. idea. And we have only 1 minute left to wind up our discussion, so let me summarize what we discussed. Yes, managerial maturity as a concept does exist. It's linked to the knowledge, to technology mastering, to the level of managerial readiness, are components of this notion, but the core of this notion is the understanding by an executive of why and what for he's doing what he's doing. And of course, managerial maturity should be and can be developed on purpose. And today we had a short discussion, but we already identified a couple of mechanisms to develop managerial maturity. That was the main points of our discussion. Thank you, dear guests. Thank you for coming to discuss this with us. Thank you, Yuri, Sinyagin, for being with us, even though it's late in your place. And I'm sure that we will see again to discuss the interesting topic. Thank you very much, and all the best.